So I am here to talk to you today about the ever-changing social media landscape that is social media platforms. And in particular, I'm going to focus on Twitter and hopefully answering some of the questions that have been on all of our minds. Is this really the end for Twitter? What will life look like in a post-Twitter world for many brands across all platforms? And, where should you really be focusing some of your precious resource in the year ahead? I'm going to be talking through some data, some trends, but also some of my own observations as someone who is a self-confessed social media addict and works with brands day in, day out across lots of different industries. So I will say, before we start, when talking about platforms as a trend, it is vast. There is so much that I could talk about. And I'd probably be here all day, but I think you'd get a bit bored after a while, and you've got the rest of my colleagues to hear from. We are spoilt for choice when it comes to platforms. There are endless amounts of, different platforms for you to choose from. Not only the kind of big players with, the mainstream brand platforms that we see, but also there are so many kind of smaller platforms for those real niche communities. And I won't go into detail on those, but in the trend report, we do a kind of overview of the kind of best of the rest for those. What I am going to focus on is who is benefiting from the exodus, which is a nice little play on words there. Thank you very much. It is also, I'm going to be honest, the last time that I refer to it as X. I'm sorry, but it is Twitter forever and always for me. What I'm not going to do today is dwell on the changes and updates that we've seen on Twitter in the last year, because you all know it. You've all lived it, I'm sure, in your day-to-day work, and you've seen all the headlines. What I am going to focus on is the impact. So, before we get started, I'm going to have a look at some data with you, but I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of audience participation. Don't worry, no one has to come stand on stage with me, that's just for us. But what I would love to do is a little show of hands in terms of kind of how we're feeling in the room. So, some questions. In terms of your own personal use of Twitter as a platform, who this year started using Twitter for the first time? Anyone? No one. I was worried there was going to be someone. Who knows? But who started using Twitter less this year overall? Quite a lot of you. Who stopped using Twitter altogether? Big number. Who started using Twitter more this year? Oh, a couple. Interesting. Well, no, that's very valid. And in terms of advertising, so for the brands that you work for, and using kind of the paid advertisement on Twitter, who is spending more on Twitter this year? No one. And who is spending less on Twitter this year? Big number. And who has spent absolutely none? Quite a few. Okay, well that's good, because it seems to compare to the reality of what I've got to talk through. So what has been happening on Twitter? We have seen a 19% decrease in traffic on the platform, which is a lot. And I'm sure a lot of you will understand why. It's become a platform that people have just started enjoying less, whether that is, the For You page that people aren't quite enjoying, the increase in kind of trolling behaviour, lots of reasons, really. And with that in mind, there has been a 55% decrease in revenue, which I'm sure Elon is very unhappy about, as someone who is looking to make a lot of money. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons within the room of why you're probably spending less money on the platform, but, big parts of that are the ad functionalities maybe not being as good as they used to be, people being worried about brand safety. We've had brands, reporting that they've seen their ads coming up in the feed next to really hateful or inappropriate content, which is not what you want for your brand, which is a segue into hate content. So our team did some social listening on the platform to look at hate content used in tweets across the platform. Not a very fun job for the Battenhall Insights team, I have to say. But what we saw was a 26% increase in hate content on the platform. So where Drew talked earlier about the kind of content that was being taken down, this is the content still staying up. And that is a mammoth number. I think, for me, I found that quite scary, 26% increase in that kind of hate content. And it's not being moderated in the way that it used to be, and it's not clearly a priority for Elon. So it is no surprise that users are planning to leave. There was a survey done earlier in the summer, I think around June, so who knows what this number looks like now, but a quarter of the users surveyed said that they plan to leave the platform within the next year. However, is it really the end of Twitter? I don't know. If you asked me a year ago if Twitter would still be around now, I think I would have said no way. I remember there was a weekend in November where things really went very chaotic and I didn't think it was going to survive the weekend. I remember thinking, Monday's going to be a nightmare because Twitter's literally not going to exist anymore. But, you know, it is persevering. The platform is clinging on. And why do we think that, you know, it's still kind of surviving? I think what I'm going to see over the next year is Twitter going from this kind of more broad, publicly used platform to something that's going to just be more useful for specific communities and niches. Sport is a really good example of that. I think Twitter is unparalleled when it comes to the kind of live tweeting nature of it. So yeah, sports in particular, journalists, politics, media, there's still a lot of use for the platform. So I think it's all to play for still in terms of it maintaining its status in that position. However, for some, Twitter is very much over. I think NPR is a great example here of where they've used data to kind of inform those decisions. So NPR came off Twitter in April, I believe it was, and then looked at their data. And six months later, they saw a less than 1% impact on their traffic. So if you're sat there thinking, well, you know, what do I do with my resource? Like, is it worth investing the time and effort into Twitter? Follow your data and see what it's telling you about that. There's probably lots of reasons for a lot of brands, whether it's, you know, customer service is a really good reason to be there as well. But really take the time to look at the data, I think, is the piece there. I've been having similar conversations with some of my clients. Last week, we talked all about this with one client of mine who's a tech company. We talked through this, we looked at the data. Brand safety is something that is particularly important for them. And in the meeting, very boldly of her, she decided to pull the plug on Twitter and we stopped posting the very next day. And excitingly, what we're looking at for the next year is a Reddit strategy, which I think is really well suited for their audience. Now, instantly pulling the plug on the platform might not be for everyone, but if you are kind of thinking about the year ahead and where you might want to spend your resources, I'm going to talk you through 2 platform options that I think should be on your radar. Number 1 is Threads, which I'm sure won't be a surprise. But, you know, everyone went into real panic mode in July when it first launched, and everyone was using it. It was absolutely mad. And it was the fastest ever growing app with over 100 million signups in 5 days. So that was huge. And then it just kind of tanked a bit. Usage dropped 80% by August. So you might be wondering, Molly, why are you recommending Threads? I do think there's some positive signs that things are on the up for the platform. So first of all, when it comes to download growth, it is doing really well. In fact, coming up in front of the other top 10 apps combined in terms of download growth in Q3, which is quite impressive. They've hit 100 million monthly active users, and I think what we're seeing is, you know, people are slowly making their way back to the app. Why did it maybe not kind of do so well in that transition period? I think they maybe launched too early and things weren't quite ready, and now they're kind of catching their feet a little bit. Has it been the slam dunk replacement of Twitter that we kind of thought it was going to be? No, but I do think it is one to watch for the year ahead. The sentiment that I'm definitely seeing on the app is this kind of community feel, which I think we'll keep coming back to as this kind of theme that people have really missed from Twitter. Also, it's owned by Meta, and they are one of the biggest companies in the world, and they are clearly invested in its success, and so I think they are going to be doing a lot to make sure that it is a success. So, speaking of success, finding success on Threads, I think my biggest, recommendation for you is really to just get on the platform and have a play around with it, whether that is playing around with it from your brand perspective or from your own individual. Get on the platform, understand it, learn it. There's nothing worse than a brand joining a platform and they clearly don't understand how the platform works or how people use it, but like get in there and learn and use it. Some good examples from some brands who I think are doing really well on the platform. So I love the kind of Finster approach that Monzo and Channel 4 have. They're obviously having a lot of fun on the platform, and I think that's doing incredibly well for their kind of brand favourability with people. Spotify really leaning into that kind of community feel. Everything they're doing is very much around actively engaging with the audience, and they get tons of engagement through it. And you can see that they really know their audience too. I'm going to take a sip of water now. Thank you. Next, my second recommendation is LinkedIn. So again, one you might not think is the most glamorous of recommendations for a trends talk, but I think we need to appreciate the glow up that LinkedIn has had in the last few years. What was formerly known as very much a kind of glorified job site has really become its own fully fledged social media platform, I would say. I think people are starting to use it a lot more like they used to use Twitter. I know it gets a bad rep for the kind of dodgy or cringy, cheesy LinkedIn influencers, but I think we're actually seeing so much less of that content and a lot more of the kind of authentic content where, you know, people are sharing their kids' graduations or opening up about mental health struggles. And I think the community there has just been incredible to watch build over the last few years. The platform has, said that they've seen a 41% increase in volume of content over the last 2 years. So there's a lot going on there. They've hit 1 billion users this month. Well done, LinkedIn. And from our own data, we looked at 150 brands across lots of top brands across different industries, and we found that LinkedIn was actually their most popular platform that they were using. 90% of them were posting actively on LinkedIn. And if you're sat in the room and you're a consumer brand and thinking B2B doesn't apply to me, it's LinkedIn, I think it's still a platform that can do so much for consumer brands, and we're seeing so many consumer brands doing really well on there. Your customers are on there. They're using the platform in a different way, so you've probably got to be creative in how you communicate with them, but there are a lot of consumer brands doing some really wicked stuff on LinkedIn. Making the most out of LinkedIn in 2024, I think the biggest thing that I would love you to take away from this is to not underestimate the power of your team. That is definitely the place that I've seen the most quality engagement over the last few years. We've done a lot of kind of training of kind of workforces so that they can understand how to use LinkedIn in a more professional way, or understanding the platform. As Nicole was saying earlier, there's lots of on-platform kind of AI tools that can help people as well. And so, yeah, I think helping them understand the value of it will give you such a good halo effect on your brand. Also, your senior leaders, a campaign that I ran earlier in the year with a brand, I think we did a kind of stream of thought leadership content through one of their senior leaders, and by far that was some of our most successful content that we did as part of that campaign when it came to quality comments and engagement. So it was a lot about kind of starting debate and kind of stoking conversation, and that is where it was all happening under his posts. And so, yeah, it's that person-to-person thing. We talk about it all the time. You know, it should be that kind of person-to-person connection. So I've talked through 2 platforms that I felt were a good broad recommendation for a lot of mainstream brands. Obviously, there's a lot of you in this room from a lot of different places, and so some of it might apply for some of you, but some of it might not apply for many of you. There might be a sports brand here sitting thinking, well, actually, Twitter's still doing very well for me, so I'll stay where I am. And absolutely, you should, because what it really comes down to at the end of the day is your data, and that is the thing that you need to pay attention to. Platforms and features will come and go, but the most important thing that you need to pay attention to is what are your audience doing? Where are they? What platforms are they using? What features do they use? What trends are they following? And if you can have a really deep understanding of your audience and your performance data, that is what is going to help you make those informed decisions. And that is everything I've got for you today. Like I said, I could stand here and talk all day about platforms. So if you want to have a chat with me, you can find me outside after, or LinkedIn. As I said, big fan of LinkedIn. But yeah, thanks for listening. And up next is the excellent Fabi, who is going to be speaking through entertainment.